You pull your jacket tighter as you step out of the house, breathe out, and see your breath freeze into white smoke dissolving into the air, fingers numb, nose red, and you are, by every biological definition, completely not designed for this environment. Now imagine you are not in the city. You are in Siberia, in the middle of a snowfield stretching to the horizon, -40 degrees, wind tearing through bare skin, darkness lasting 2 months without a single ray of sunlight. And yet your ancestors lived there, not for one season, for tens of thousands of years. Why? A tropical primate that is just warm meat, fragile meat, meat without fur, meat born on the African savanna. You would think they ran back to the equator every time the ice came, but they did not. At 71 degrees north latitude, on the bank of the Yana River in Siberia, 2 milk teeth were dug up from the permafrost. They belonged to 2 children who lived 31,600 years ago, in a place where winter never ended. And the reason they stayed was never just one thing. It was never only one thing. There are many layers of explanation, each stranger than the last. And together they paint the picture that you are not the person you think you are, but the choice of evolution across many generations. This goes deep. Let's begin. The species Homo sapiens evolved from the African savanna 300,000 years ago, a species of 25 to 35 degrees Celsius. That species was rewritten by the ice. On paper, we should not be able to live in Siberia. We do not have thick fur. We do not have blubber like seals. We do not hibernate. We are primates, cousins of monkeys and chimpanzees. On paper, we are a biological disaster for the far north. And yet in 2019, a group of geneticists at the University of Copenhagen published something shocking in the journal Nature. They sequenced the genomes of the 2 Yana children, genome coverage of 25 times and 7 times, extremely high quality. And what they found overturned everything about when humans reached the Arctic. Those 2 children belong to a population present in the Arctic from at least 38,000 years ago, a group scientists call the ancient North Siberians. Let that sink in. 38,000 years. While your Asian ancestors were still migrating through Southeast Asia, there were already people in the Arctic, not merely surviving. And this is the mind-bending part. We lived where winter never ends long enough for it to rewrite us. Not a metaphor, real biology. The ice acted as a harsh editor. People who could not handle the cold died before reproducing. People with cold tolerance gene variants lived, had children, passed those variants to the next generation. Across thousands of generations, cold tolerance became biology. It became instinct. It became the default code. You have the TBX15 gene that controls subcutaneous fat distribution, the variant in Inuit people coming from Denisovans, ancient relatives who lived in Siberia for tens of thousands of years. You have UCP1 that controls brown fat-producing heat. You have FADs affecting lipid metabolism, critical when you had to eat a lot of animal fat to survive winter. You have LRP5 affecting bone density, so bones do not break when minerals drop due to cold. This is not a trivia list. This is the record of a rewriting. So when you feel cold and your body automatically reacts, blood vessels constrict, muscles shiver, brown fat in the neck starts burning, that is not a general response of all primates. That is a system finely tuned over 40,000 years of selection. This is real biology. Now, let's talk about the thing that is burning in your neck right now that you do not know about. Right now, somewhere between your neck and shoulders, something is burning, not a metaphor. Burning in the real biochemical sense, converting fat into heat directly, not through muscle movement. You have never felt it. You do not know it is there. But it is working for you right now. It has a name: brown adipose tissue. Brown adipose tissue, abbreviated BAT. Unlike white fat that only stores energy, brown fat burns energy into heat. Inside brown fat cells is a protein named UCP1, uncoupling protein 1, that uncouples the ATP production process to convert it directly into heat. Basically, your body has an internal heating system that you do not control by will. It turns on when cold, turns off when warm. You do not decide. For most of your adult life, this brown fat is almost invisible. Medicine once thought only newborns had it, and adults lost it as they grew up. Wrong. In 2009, scientists discovered brown fat in adults when doing PET scans looking for cancer. Brown fat glowed on the images because it was burning glucose. It had been there all along. We just did not know how to look. Now here is the crazy part. The Fuegian people of Tierra del Fuego, the southern tip of South America, lived in a subpolar oceanic climate with average winter temperatures of 0 degrees Celsius. They did not wear full clothing, no long pants, no coats, only animal fat smeared on bare skin and a small piece of hide on the shoulder. In 1960, a researcher named Hamel measured the basal metabolic rate, BMR, of 9 Fuegian people of the Alakaluf group. Result: 160% compared to average white people when exposed to cold. Their bodies were burning at an exceptional rate to heat themselves. This is not science fiction. This is a conference report of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States. Naked humans in a snowstorm, burning calories at a rate that a temperate person wrapped tightly in a down jacket cannot achieve. In 2021, researchers at Sapienza University in Rome investigated why. They analyzed the genomes of 5 ancient Fuegian people and found a gene variant named OXEC4 190,771,160 rupees. 4 out of 5 Fuegian people had this variant. In 14 people from other cold populations, Siberian, Athabascan, Greenlander, only 1 had it. Probability of chance: 0.0015. Not a coincidence. HOXC4 controls the differentiation of brown fat cells. The Fuegian variant is predicted to increase HOXC4 expression, leading to more brown fat. Not a miracle. 1 DNA letter changed. 1 variant. Enough to allow nakedness in a storm. So when you step out into the cold and your fingers go numb, but your body does not freeze, that is brown fat burning. When you feel a warmth spreading through your chest after a few minutes of cold exposure, that is UCP1 working. You have an internal furnace. It is the size of a grape. It sits between the neck and the shoulder blades. You do not feel it because your body was not designed for you to feel it. It was designed to keep you alive while you were busy with other things. It is the legacy of ancestors who lived where you cannot imagine, and it is running right now. You do not need to know how to turn it on. You do not need to train it. You do not need to think about it. It was written into the default configuration of your body before you were born, before your grandparents were born, from tens of thousands of years ago. Right now, as you breathe, as you sit here, there is a small fire grape waiting in your neck, waiting for a signal from your skin that cold is coming, waiting to start burning. It is the sign that you belong to the place where winter does not end. But biology alone is not enough. In 2021, a group of paleontologists published an important study in the Journal of Human Evolution. They ran heat loss models for ancient sites in Western Europe. Conclusion: physiological and anatomical adaptations alone, even brown fat, even elevated metabolic rates, were not enough to withstand the winter temperatures of ancient Europe, even during warmer interglacial periods. We needed something else. We needed something no other species has. We needed tools. Not tools for fighting, tools for wearing. The only species on the planet that invented sewn clothing is us. No other species. In Denisova Cave in Siberia, where your Denisovan ancestors once lived, archaeologists found a needle made from bird bone, about 7 centimeters long, with a small hole at the end. Date: around 50,000 years. This is the oldest physical evidence of sewn clothing. Not animal skins draped over the shoulders. Seams, sleeves, leg tubes, inner pockets. Clothing designed to trap heat in the inner air layer, windproof, moisture-resistant. This bone needle is one of the most important technologies we ever invented, and no other species, not Neanderthals, not Denisovans, not any child, invented it on their own. Neanderthals were our close relatives. They had lived in cold Europe for hundreds of thousands of years before Homo sapiens arrived. Their bodies were designed for cold, broad chests, short limbs, large noses to warm the air they breathed in. But they had no bone needles, no evidence of sewn clothing. They went extinct around 40,000 years ago, matching the time when Homo sapiens arrived with sewing technology. Neanderthals were stronger. We had the needle. It is not that we were stronger than Neanderthals, we were not. Neanderthals were stronger, more muscular, more anatomically adapted to cold. But we had the needle, and the needle allowed us to go farther, higher, colder, to 71 degrees north latitude. You figured out how to sew clothes before you figured out agriculture, before you figured out the wheel, before you figured out writing. The bone needle came first. That was the smartest step any of your ancestors ever took. And honestly, it is quite funny. We conquered the Arctic with a piece of bird bone with a hole in it. But even with brown fat and the bone needle, there were 3 things that should have prevented your ancestors from living there. Think like a serious evolutionary biologist. You are a tropical primate, originally from Africa. You want to migrate to the Arctic. There are 3 big problems that simple theory says you cannot overcome. 3 barriers that should have snuffed out this adventure from the start. But we overcame them all. Here is how. And each way is a story of thousands of deaths before one victory. In the wild, your ancestors had no health insurance, no doctors. If a newborn died from cold, that family lost its genetic future. If one winter killed a third of the village, that population could go extinct. Each problem below could have ended the story. Nothing in these 3 is small. Problem 1. Heat. Naked humans lose heat extremely fast. At 0 degrees Celsius without clothes, the body loses about 200 calories per hour just to stay warm. On a winter night at 71 degrees north latitude, temperatures can drop to negative 30 degrees Celsius. That number multiplies many times. Problem? Where do you get the calories from? No spring for 7 straight months. No fruit, no seeds, no vegetables. Only snow and large moving animals. The solution we found: hunt mammoths. Hunt woolly rhinos. Hunt wild horses. Eat organs, eat brains, eat bone marrow, drink blood. A diet of 80% animal fat. You cannot live on this diet today. You would get heart disease in 6 months. But your ancestors ate like this for thousands of years without dying of heart disease. The question is why? You already know the answer. Problem 2. Water. In the Arctic winter, all water is frozen. You cannot drink ice water. Your body has to melt it, and melting water costs enormous energy. 1 liter of ice at negative 20 degrees Celsius needs about 100 kilocalories to melt into water at 0 degrees Celsius. Multiply by 2 to 3 liters per person per day. In a community of 30 people, that is 6,000 to 9,000 calories per day just for drinking water. Solution: continuous fire. Not fire for coziness. Fire so you do not die of thirst. Archaeological evidence at Yana shows fire pits maintained continuously, not on and off. This means someone always had to watch the fire, night and day, for 7 months of winter. Problem 3. Light. At 71 degrees north latitude, the sun does not rise for 2 months. Completely no daylight from about the end of November to mid-January. Biological problem. You need vitamin D. Your body synthesizes it from UVB rays on the skin. No sun, no UVB, no vitamin D. Vitamin D deficiency causes rickets, weak immune system, brittle bones. Psychological problem. Your circadian rhythm depends on light cycles. 2 months of darkness causes sleep disorders, severe depression, disorientation. Solution: eat seal liver. Eat fatty fish, eat whale oil. Seal liver contains vitamin D levels 100 times higher than any plant food. Your ancestors did not know what vitamin D was, but they found the food that kept them alive in the dark. 3 problems, 3 solutions. None of the solutions could be found by simple thinking. Each solution required thousands of years of deadly trial and error. The person who found out to eat seal liver, their parents had died from vitamin D deficiency. The person who knew to maintain continuous fire, their grandparents had died of thirst. This knowledge was written in blood. Every survival lesson in the Arctic is a tombstone. But here is the thing that is almost never talked about. Put your hand into a bucket of ice water. Keep it there. Pain. Fingers go numb. Skin turns white because blood vessels constrict to keep heat for the central organs. This is the initial response that every mammal has. But if you keep your hand longer than 5 minutes, something strange starts to happen. The blood vessels in your fingers do not stay constricted forever. They begin to oscillate, constrict, dilate, constrict, dilate, in cycles of about 5 to 10 minutes. This has a scientific name, cold-induced vasodilation, or CIVD, also called the Hunter's response, or Lewis waves, named after the physiologist Thomas Lewis, who described it in 1930. You do not know you have it. But right now, when your hand is cold, it is running. This is the system that saves your fingers from freezing to death. If the blood vessels stayed constricted forever, tissue would die from lack of oxygen. But if the blood vessels dilated completely, you would lose too much heat, and the core body would die. Evolutionary solution: oscillation. Give the fingers a short stream of warm blood, enough to save the tissue, then constrict again to protect heat for the heart. You do not control this. You do not know it is happening, but it is saving your fingers from necrosis right now. But here is the important part. Not everyone has this response to the same degree. Studies comparing Inuit people in Alaska with people from temperate regions show Inuit have higher oscillation frequency, longer dilation time, warmer fingers when exposed to cold for the same duration. This is not learned. It appears in 3-year-old Inuit children, too early to be the result of life experience. This is an adaptation refined over thousands of generations of Inuit living, where this response was the difference between living and losing fingers, between being able to hunt and not being able to hunt, between the lineage continuing and the lineage ending. You have Lewis waves. You have it right now. It does not matter where you live. That is the default code of the species. But if your ancestors lived where it was cold, your version is tuned stronger. If your ancestors were from the tropics, it still works, only weaker. You can strengthen it with controlled cold exposure, which modern ice bath people are accidentally rediscovering. They did not invent anything. They are just waking up a system that was already in them. So if you think you are helpless against the cold, think again. Your body is running a thermoregulation system refined over countless generations of survival. Not perfect, not complete, but present. And every time your fingers warm up at the right moment, that is the Lewis wave. That is the gene rewritten from thousands of generations ago saving you. That is the ancient code, written by people you never met, in a place you never went, for a reason you never imagined, keeping your fingers from freezing right now. You do not see them, but they wrote you. And then there is the factor that no other species ever had. Polar bears live in the Arctic. Arctic foxes live in the Arctic. They have thick fur, thick fat, cold adaptation genes that we do not have. But they cannot tell their young. Do not go into the western den this year. Last year the wolves nested there. They have no language. We do. Language is the anti-cold technology that no other species on the planet possesses. An Inuit grandmother can teach a 3-year-old grandchild how to recognize the signs of a snowstorm coming in 3 days. That knowledge does not need to go through genes, does not need to wait thousands of years of selection. It goes through speech in 1 hour, from one person to one person. What to eat in the winter without sunlight, where to find animals when the snow is thick, how to know if the ice is thick enough to walk on, which leaves fight infection when a wound will not heal in the cold, how to give birth when the temperature inside the tent drops below zero. Thousands of pieces of knowledge, passed from generation to generation, improved with each cycle, adjusted for each region, all by words and stories. We did not survive in the Arctic alone. We survived as groups. Groups that did not just share body heat at night or food when someone failed to hunt. Groups shared memory, and the group's memory lives longer than an individual's memory. That is how we overcame the barrier that pure biology could not overcome. A leopard cannot tell its cub about the worst winter of its life. A bear cannot warn its cub about the water that taught it a painful lesson. But your grandmother can tell you about what saved your great-grandfather through the worst winter. That story can save you 80 years later. That is what kept us in the Arctic. Now, let's be honest about one thing because otherwise this video would be irresponsible. Not everyone succeeded. The story I just told, Yana, brown fat, bone needle, Lewis waves, speech across generations, sounds like a victory story. But if I stopped there, I would be lying to you about history. There are places we went and did not return from. There are lineages that disappeared, and those lineages deserve to be told. Yana itself is the example. The ancient North Siberians, the population of the two children at the beginning of the video, disappeared during the last glacial maximum, about 20,000 to 11,000 years ago. They did not pass their genes directly to modern Native Americans. Climate conditions worsened, food ran out, the population collapsed. Later Native Americans have mixed ancestry, part ANS, part East Asian. In Spain, in the Piedra River Valley in Guadalajara province, archaeologists dug up a rock shelter. Location, 1,950 meters above sea level. Modern climate, one of the coldest regions of Iberia. Record minimum temperature in the nearby village, Molina de Aragon, negative 28.2 degrees Celsius. In October of 2023, a research team led by Manuel Alcaraz Castaño published radiocarbon results in the journal PLOS ONE. Humans had lived at this place repeatedly. Level 5 of the site dates to 20,800 to 21,400 years ago, right at the peak of the last glacial maximum. Level 1 about 15,100 to 16,600 years ago, during Heinrich Stadial 1, a severe cold phase. Pollen analysis shows a dry steppe shrub landscape. Winter temperatures could drop below negative 20 degrees Celsius. They still stayed. The Fuegian people I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the group with the UXC4 variant and BMR of 160%, were nearly wiped out. In 1520, when Europeans first arrived in Tierra del Fuego, there were about 10,000 Fuegian people. By the 1960s, fewer than 100 people remained, not dying from cold, dying from measles, smallpox, tuberculosis, diseases their ancestors had never encountered and their immune systems were not rewritten for. The cold adaptation that had saved them for thousands of years could not save them from the viruses Europeans brought. The skeletal collection at the Museum of Anthropology in Rome, where scientists found the UXC4 variant, was collected in the 1880s because explorers knew this population was about to disappear. The pattern repeats, and this is the lesson no one wants to talk about. Adaptation is a double-edged sword. When you are finely tuned for one thing, cold, you lose flexibility for other things. A body written for the Arctic is not written for European viruses. Ancient North Siberians written for the mammoth steppe were not written for a warming climate. That is the price of extreme adaptation. You win at one thing by losing capability at many others. There is no free lunch in evolution. You are not the descendant of all possible ancestors. You are the descendant of those who survived long enough to have children. Your existence is evidence of thousands of successful selections and of thousands of failed selections that you do not come from. Every disappeared lineage is another possibility of the human species, another way to be human, another gene combination that might have won if conditions had been a little different. You are one of many possible drafts, and the draft you are living is the draft of those who made it through enough winters. Not forever, just enough. There is one final layer of this story that I have saved until the end because it truly overturns how you think about your species. The familiar story of our species is a story of conquest. We conquered nature, we domesticated fire, we overcame climate, but that way of telling has a problem. It is completely wrong. We did not conquer the cold, we did not defeat it, we did not overcome it by will. We let the cold rewrite us. In 160 generations in the Arctic, each generation submitted its body to selection. Those who did not fit died before reproductive age. Those who fit lived. The ice was not an enemy defeated. The ice was the editor we allowed to edit our code. You are the final draft of an editing process lasting 40,000 years. The two children who lost their milk teeth at Yana were not the winners. They were your first draft. Their parents, their grandparents, 10,000 generations before them, each added or lost a line in the draft. Until that draft became you, sitting here, with fingers that have Lewis waves waiting. And here is the thing almost no one has ever told you. If you think this only applies to people living in cold places, wrong. You can live in Saigon, in São Paulo, in Manila, in Delhi. You may never have seen snow, but if your ancestors migrated through Eurasia during the Pleistocene, you carry genes that were rewritten. They hide in you without needing a name. They were already there before you were born. They simply exist, waiting. The victory of our species is not defeating the ice. The victory is belonging to the place we should not belong to. We did not conquer the Arctic. We let the Arctic conquer us, until we became something that could live there. That is a strange and beautiful form of victory. It does not resemble any other form of victory in nature. Lions were not rewritten by the savanna. Whales were not rewritten by the ocean. They evolved for their environments from the beginning, but we did not. We are the only species that voluntarily went into a place we did not belong and allowed that place to rewrite us. And that is the most beautiful thing about this story. Your species is the only one on the planet that has gone through every climate zone and not died out in most of them. Not because we are tough, not because we are strong, because we allowed each climate zone to remake us. So the next time you step out into the cold and see your breath freeze into white smoke dissolving into the air, stop for a second. That is the breath of every ancestor who survived at Yana. That is the breath of the Fuegian naked in the snowstorm. That is the breath of the person who sat by the fire at Charco Verde 21,000 years ago, waiting for winter to end. The feeling of cold pain etched on your skin is not a sign that you are weak. That is the brown fat in your neck starting to burn. That is the blood vessels in your fingers starting to oscillate. That is every ancestor from Yana until now waking up in you. Your skin knows. Your blood vessels know. The brown fat knows. You do not need to conquer winter. You do not need to win it. You do not need to defeat it. You only need to step out and let it recognize who you are. It already knows. So do you. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because every next video is another layer of the story about who you really are, written by people you never met.